So, it looks like it's time to chime in with the old Gooner Gate and take a look at what's going on with it. Because I think Melonie Mac opened up a can of worms that it's going to be hard to put back. Now, I can't find the original picture, and if I really looked, I could try, but I'm just going to leave it alone right now. But this is basically what Melonie Mac was complaining about. In the first Descendant, there is a video someone made and posted on X and some other places of their female character basically wearing a leotard, wearing the equivalent of a one-piece bathing suit, and basically shaking their butt. Now, I can see where Melonie is upset by this and could be a little offended, but honestly, I would consider this maybe a little lewd. Definitely a little on the inappropriate side, but what I call it, since I can't use the P version, that's what I call it, corny. No, it's actually okay. I've seen a lot worse, and there are a lot worse. I mean, I'd have to say that there are certain scenes in strict role-playing games by a video game company called BioWare that, while appropriate and in with the story and mature, are could be argued might be a little racy or more suggestive than this. This is just brilliantly immature. I wouldn't even consider it gooning. And actually, if I had to consider something gooning, it would probably be the Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. Now, I'm a big fan of the Dead or Alive game, and the games are pretty good. And yes, I'm aware of why most people buy them, and I kind of did too. But then I started playing them and I was like, wow, I got really invested in the story. Like between Ayane and Hayate and Kasumi and some of the other characters. There's some story there into that world building. It's rather interesting. But yeah, Extreme Beach Volleyball, I couldn't buy that game. I mean, let's be honest. This is what came out in 2003, so about 3 or 4 years before the Wii. Was there another controller that I could use one-handed and play a video game with? Because that's pretty much what beach volleyball was. Don't get me wrong, graphically it's a beautiful game, but there is a little bit of maybe too much fan service and cash grab there, but to each of their own. What bothers me is that Melonie for so long has been on the side of less censorship and let's make games look like they should. If these characters are going to be running around as soldiers or athletes or whatnot, they should look like, in shape, like soldiers or athletes. Especially for someone, and you can see in this one picture, is obviously a really huge fan of Lara Croft and Tomb Raider. Now, you can see from the pictures I'm bringing up now of the way that Lara Croft has been dressed all the way from the first game up until the last. Now, I know the last picture, she's dressed in a parka and Arctic clothes, but let's be honest, you can tell by the wind and the snow blowing around in the picture that she's obviously somewhere where she would get frostbite and die if she's not wearing this. Her other outfits, again, she's either running around the jungle, climbing around things, or swimming. Hence, she should be dressed the way she's dressed. And while I wouldn't say this is, hey, let's go eat a steak dinner someplace at a really fancy restaurant dress, it is dress appropriate for a female athlete. And here are some pictures you can see from these female athletes, track and field mostly. They are dressed in tight outfits that allow optimal movement, and there you go. Again, is this lewd? Is this obscene? No. But there are some that would, and if Melonie's doing this, she is definitely jumping on the far Puritan busybody that, we've kind of been fighting and arguing about and pushing against for the past 4 years. Now, what this really reminds me of, and you can probably, if you're really observant from my rather horrible thumbnail, get an idea what I'll be talking about, is this all reminds me of something I once watched long ago, of a show that was smart enough to handle all these things in an appropriate way, an entertaining way, and even an edgy way for the time. That's right, I'm relating Gooner Gate to a Simpsons episode. Namely, the episode from Season 2, Episode 9, Itchy and Scratchy and Marge. TLDR, Maggie hits Homer in the head with a rubber mallet, and when Marge finds him and brings him upstairs, she can't understand why Maggie would do that. She sits Maggie in front of the TV with Bart and Lisa, who are watching Itchy and Scratchy. And all of a sudden, after watching the violence on the show, she understands why and how this influenced Maggie. Now, that's said and done. The other two kids watch it and they don't do it, but hey. So Marge ends up writing a letter to the head of the studio that makes Itchy and Scratchy, and he gives it to some writers, and the writers make a parody of her on the show, which gets her upset, and she goes and creates SNA, Springfieldians for Nonviolence, Understanding, and Helping. And while they're outside the studio boycotting, Reverend Lovejoy and some of the other ladies from town stop by and wonder what SNA is. And after Marge tells them, they also start protesting with them. Eventually, this leads to some pushback from the animation studio. And eventually, Marge goes on Smartline. And then they get thousands and thousands and thousands of letters asking them to change Itchy and Scratchy, which they do. And it's horrible watching them have to call Marge after they write scripts to get approval. Interesting that a lot of people complain about HR and the blue-haired ladies, and Marge has blue hair. I know that it's not Marge's fault, but a little prophetic. And, again, a lot of people say that The Simpsons often predict many things in the future as a joke, and all of a sudden they come true. This, of course, leads to Itchy and Scratchy being grossly watered down and really just, my God, Care Bears and My Little Pony have more depth to the show than, it has what they show. She really, really ruins it. And the kids go outside and play. So, some other things happen, and SNA has some other victories against, censorship, not against, but for censorship, until something happens. And that is that the statue of David, Michelangelo's statue of David, the famous Renaissance statue, is on tour and will be coming to Springfield's Museum of Art for a few days. Now, here's a conundrum for Marge and for the rest of the story. Now, Marge is an artist at heart, and she thinks that the Statue of David is one of the great masterpieces of the world, and it should be seen by everybody. However, Reverend Lovejoy's wife and the rest of the ladies of SNA come up in arms and are a little upset that it's coming to town. I think it should be boycotted and covered up. So they come to Marge for support, and Marge pushes back, believing that it's art. So she ends up going back on Smartline with the producer of the show and the head of the studio, and I do believe Dr. Monroe, and they end up talking about how hypocritical it is that Marge wants to block one form of expression, human expression, but allow another. Now, there is a point later in the show that she makes, which is something that, especially in Western culture, we have to always argue against, and that is the argument of what is pornography and what isn't. Also what Melonie Mac is discussing. Also the fact that why it's okay for us in Western culture to show violence, but you can't show nudity or sex. So that's a debate for another time. Episode ends with Itchy and Scratchy being returned to normal, and Marge being, again, upset that, the kids would rather watch violence than see this great piece of art. And Homer laughs hysterically because they're going to have field trips to the place anyway, so the kids are going to see it. So there you go. So what have we learned from Itchy, Scratchy, and Marge? And what we've learned from Melonie? Well, I hope Melonie realizes that you can't always pick and choose, and censorship leads to more censorship. And honestly, she doesn't have to interact with the content if she doesn't. She wants to be the great Christian video game reviewer. I mean, Melonie, go ahead and God bless you. I'm sure there's a market for it. But you can't be the moral busybody that takes away everyone's fun. You see, the video game industry, much like the movie industry and TV in the, I think, 96, 97, TV started putting their voluntary rating system up. Video games have the ESRB. And the ESRB clearly states what's in the games under its ratings. You know? E's for everyone, there's E10, there's the other ones, there's mature, there's adults only, you know, and they state rather clearly what's in them. They're pretty detailed too, I'll give them credit. And if you go on the ESRB site, you can look for rated games, and they will, of course, tell you what's in the game, what to expect from the game. So, Melonie, if you don't want to interact with this content, you don't have to. But for those people who do like to, leave it alone. It's fine. There's a market for it. And at some level, there's always been a level of, I don't want to say completely maybe gooning, but just, you know, that male gaze, I think, that Melonie's trying to get at. Not purposely, but it's kind of approaching that whole anti-male gaze. I mean, let's be honest. There are a lot of female-led video game franchises. Metroid comes to mind. I mean, yes, in the original game, we didn't know Samus Aran was a woman till the end. I don't know if you had like the perfect ending. So there you go. Again, Tomb Raider. And yes, looking at Lara Croft, the way she's dressed, there is a level of attractive and sex appeal there. But it wasn't the main part. And there have always been games that had, for lack of a better term, I like to call it the box art girl. Basically, it's the image that tends to promote or sell the game. EverQuest had the elven princess, what's her name? Fiona Ver. I'm going to mispronounce it, but that's okay. I'll show a picture. It'll be fine. Oh, here's a picture. And then you've had games like the box art for Dragon Age had, not the box art, but the promotional images had the huge ogre, and you had what I'm assuming would later be Morgan in the front, obviously dressed somewhat, you know, showing some cleavage. I mean, Perfect Dark had you on a dark, and let's be honest, it was a full body skin suit, and it wasn't showing much, but it wasn't leaving anything to the imagination either. So you have this, and if usually, I mean, things with like that are just sex appeal usually die out, but things that are, if they're good and they have the sex appeal, they're going to continue on because they're a good game. So there you go. And again, what is art? What is pornography? I mean, I'm going to bring up this picture of the Statue of David here. Please note, Statue of David, for you who don't know, is fully anatomically correct. And no, that is not some sort of slug monster clawing up his leg and trying to, whatever. I'll stop there. That is a piece of marble left reasonably untouched by Michelangelo, so it would be supported when he stood up. You know, kind of like a support for a base. Like why action figures sometimes have really heavy legs, heavy feet. Also, I'm going to give you another picture. And this is also from the Renaissance. It's a portrait, and the portrait is called, painting is called, The Birth of Venus. As you can see, I've been on other YouTube channels and looking for other pictures of this to show. And as you can see, this is art. Not pornography. I mean, yes, she is more than 90% nude, almost 90% nude. I mean, but again, she's perfectly covered, and this is art. There's nothing wrong with admiring, you know, the male-female form. We've done it for years. Pornography usually involves some sort of action, and it's usually intent. So, Melonie, just leave us alone. I mean, I, for one, would really like to know what kind of caused this heel turn for Melonie. I mean, I know she's a pretty devout Christian, but before she was like, pray, live and let live. We're not getting forced with all this other weird stuff in video games. It's just, straight. And I don't mean straight. Well, yeah, I'd say I didn't mean straight. Just normal old, pre-2016 video games and video game content. So, again, Melonie, drop it. Let's all move on. I don't think anything else needs to be said. Don't need to pull a Marge. Don't need to be a moral busybody. Just need to enjoy what you enjoy, and other people will enjoy what they enjoy. And as long as it's, doesn't cause any physical, mental harm, I think we're fine. Like anything, moderation. But what can I say? If you liked the video, feel free to like and subscribe, or leave a comment below. I could really use the help and some advice, because I'm still figuring out how to do all this. Take care.